A woman with no friends walks a path most will never understand. In a world that glorifies social circles and celebrates being surrounded, she moves quietly, unnoticed by many, but never forgotten by the one who matters most. She isn't broken, she isn't bitter. She's becoming. Every unanswered message, every plan she wasn't invited to, every moment she sits alone isn't just silence. It's a sacred pause. A space being cleared not for noise, but for divine direction. People look at her and wonder what's wrong, but they don't see what's being made right. They don't see the strength building behind her stillness, the healing growing behind her isolation, the power being shaped in her patience. While others seek validation in numbers, she's being taught to find contentment in solitude. While they chase belonging, she's learning to belong to herself. Her heart is becoming anchored, not in fleeting friendships, but in something unshakable. She cries yes. She wonders why yes. But deep down she knows. She's not being punished, she's being protected. Not everyone deserves access to her soul. Not every smiling face has good intentions. Sometimes being friendless is a shield, not a scar, as she's being pulled away so she can be preserved. The loudest pain often leads to the deepest growth. This world might call her lonely, but heaven sees her as focused. While others are busy fitting in, she's being prepared to stand out. While they chase acceptance, she's finding alignment. There is something sacred about a woman who sits with her own heart and doesn't run. Who feels the ache of being left out, yet doesn't compromise to belong. Who holds her own hand when no one else shows up. That is a woman of fire. A woman of faith. A woman who doesn't just survive loneliness. She transforms in it. She emerges wiser, sharper, more in tune with who she is and who she was meant to be. Because not every season is about being surrounded. Some seasons are for stripping away the noise. So she can finally hear the whisper that tells her she is enough. That she's loved even when overlooked. That her value doesn't shrink in someone else's absence. That even when no one texts, no one checks, no one remembers, she is still seen, still chosen, still whole. The world will never understand the kind of woman who builds herself in the quiet. But one day, they'll witness the strength of someone who didn't need an audience to become unstoppable. Loneliness is not a weakness, but a calling to strengthen your connection with your Creator. It is often in the quietest moments, when the world grows distant and voices fall silent, that the heart begins to hear what truly matters. In a time when being constantly surrounded is seen as success, solitude is misunderstood. But there's a difference between isolation that breaks and solitude that builds. When you find yourself alone, not by choice but by life's strange unfolding, it can feel like a punishment. Yet, in that space, the soul begins to whisper what it's been longing to say. You begin to realize that people were never meant to fill the emptiness that only the divine can occupy. Loneliness strips away the distractions. It removes the noise of superficial connections and hollow conversations. What remains is you, raw, unfiltered, and searching. In that search, a window opens. A place where you can cry without explanation, pray without performance, and breathe without judgment. It is there, in the absence of people, that presence becomes clearer. The presence of the one who never leaves, who never forgets, who never fails. This kind of loneliness does not weaken you. It teaches you how to stand alone with grace, how to walk through shadows with faith, and how to speak to the heavens with a heart wide open. When no one is checking on you, the one who created you is. When no one hears your silence, the one who shaped your soul listens intently. It's in loneliness that your prayers become deeper, your gratitude becomes real, and your connection with your Creator becomes intimate. There's a beauty in being unseen by the world but completely known by God. There's a strength in being removed from the chaos, only to discover the calm that comes when you lean into divine nearness. While others fill their loneliness with noise, you are being asked to fill it with remembrance, with reflection, with sincerity. It's not a mistake that you're in this space. It's not an accident that people fell away. You're being invited to know yourself and your Creator in a way that the crowd could never allow. In that quiet age, you are being refined. In that sacred gap between what you had and what you're waiting for, a deeper connection is being born. Not outward, but upward. Being alone does not mean you're unworthy. It means you're being protected from the wrong company. In a world where being constantly surrounded is mistaken for validation, solitude can feel like rejection. But sometimes, the emptiness around you is a shield placed by the divine, not a sign that something is missing within you. You're not being overlooked. You're being preserved. You're not being cast aside. You're being safeguarded from hearts that do not know how to hold you with care. There are people whose presence in your life would have derailed your peace, clouded your purpose, and distracted you from the direction your soul was meant to follow. You may sit alone, scroll through conversations that never reach your name, and wonder why no one stays, but you fail to see the mercy in that absence. You weren't created to carry connections that break you from the inside. You weren't meant to chase validation in the form of shallow friendships or temporary attention. Sometimes, the silence around you is the loudest proof that you're being loved differently. Not through applause, but through protection. Not everyone you lose is a loss. Some are subtractions made out of mercy. Their absence is not a gap, it's a gift. Their distance is not abandonment, it's alignment. You don't see the conversations behind closed doors that were meant to harm you. You don't hear the words spoken when you weren't around. But the one who sees all does. And sometimes, in his mercy, he removes you before harm reaches your heart. You're not alone because you're not enough. You're alone because your soul is being shielded from what it cannot afford to carry. Every moment you spend in isolation is a moment being used to recalibrate your worth, to remind you that your value does not come from who chooses you, but from the one who created you. This is not emptiness. This is divine preservation. You're not missing out, you're being redirected. The wrong people may not have entered, but that doesn't mean the right ones won't. Until then, being alone is not a punishment. It's preparation. The delay is not denial, it's development. When you begin to see your solitude as safety, and you stop begging for inclusion, and start embracing the peace that only purposeful distance can bring, the quiet is not a void. It is a veil hiding you from harm you didn't even know was near. The silence around you can be a divine space where healing, clarity, and growth take root. In a world that thrives on noise, attention, and constant stimulation, silence is often feared or misunderstood. But there is a sacred depth to silence that cannot be reached when surrounded by distraction. When life quiets down, when people walk away, when conversations stop and the phones stop ringing, it's easy to feel forgotten. Yet what may seem like absence is actually presence. Just not the kind the world teaches you to recognize. It is in that silence that you begin to hear your own soul again. Not the voices of expectation, not the noise of comparison, but the raw, honest pulse of your inner truth. Healing begins in this space not because of what is said, but because of what is finally allowed to surface. The pain you buried, the tears you postponed, the wounds you ignored, all rise in the stillness. But they rise not to break you, they rise to be seen, acknowledged, and released. Silence holds a mirror, and though it may hurt to look, it offers the chance to finally mend. In this divine space, you are no longer performing, you are no longer pleasing, you are simply being. And in being, you are beginning again. Clarity finds its way into the cracks once clouded by confusion. The things that didn't make sense, the decisions you couldn't make, the feelings you couldn't understand. They all start to settle in silence. The fog begins to lift, you begin to see what you need, not just what you want. You begin to discern between what is real and what is noise. You stop reacting and start reflecting. This quiet, often uncomfortable, becomes the very place where your next chapter begins to form. Not from chaos, but from calm. Growth emerges not loudly, but steadily. In that space of reflection, your mind resets, your heart recalibrates. The silence becomes your soil, and without even realizing it, your roots deepen. You may not see immediate transformation, but something is shifting beneath the surface. You are learning how to stand, how to breathe, how to trust again. Not in the world, but in what's being written for you beyond what eyes can see. What the world calls loneliness, heaven calls alignment. The silence that surrounds you is not empty. It is full of what the noise tried to bury. It is here that you rise without rushing, heal without hiding, and grow without seeking permission. True companionship begins when you start finding peace in your own soul. Until you are at ease within yourself, every connection you seek will be rooted in need, not wholeness. Most people run to others to escape their inner chaos, hoping someone else can fill the silence they've been too afraid to sit with. But peace isn't something that comes from the outside. It's an internal stillness, a quiet assurance that you are enough, even when no one else is around. When you begin to nurture that space, when you stop waiting for others to complete you, that's when something shifts. You no longer chase presence out of fear of absence. You no longer cling to people just to avoid being alone. You start choosing companionship, not out of desperation, but from a place of clarity and calm. When you're at peace with who you are, you attract different energy. You stop settling for relationships that drain you just to feel connected. You begin to protect your time, your spirit, your space. You no longer look for someone to rescue you from yourself. Instead, you seek someone who can sit with you in your calm, not just your chaos. Someone who respects your silence, not just your stories. That level of companionship only becomes possible when you're not afraid of your own reflection. When you can wake up, Look in the mirror, and know that you are whole without applause, without validation, without company. Inner peace isn't about perfection. It's about presence. Being present with your emotions, your thoughts, your journey, even when it's messy. It's about making peace with your past, and choosing not to bleed it into every new relationship. It's understanding that being alone isn't a flaw, it's a phase of becoming. Once that becomes your foundation, companionship turns from survival to something sacred. You're not attaching to avoid falling. You're connecting, because you're already standing strong. Only when your soul stops begging for noise, does it begin to crave alignment. And in that space, the people who come into your life will meet you where you are. Not to fix you, but to walk with you. They will not be drawn to your emptiness, but to your wholeness, because you no longer seek to be saved, you seek to be seen. You no longer ask to be filled, you ask to be understood. That is where true companionship begins. With a soul that has learned how to be its own friend first. Sometimes isolation is the barrier between you and unnecessary pain sent by temporary people. It doesn't always feel like protection in the moment. In fact, it often feels like rejection. When people walk away, when calls go unanswered, when you watch others form circles you're never invited into, it can feel like a wound. But what you don't see is what you've been spared from. There are people whose presence in your life would have caused more harm than healing, more confusion than clarity, more noise than nourishment. Sometimes, isolation steps in like a shield, separating you from what looks like connection but is actually a storm in disguise. The solitude that hurts now may be saving you from emotional chaos that would have left lasting scars. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay. Some are sent as lessons, not lifelines. And some never arrive at all because you've been divinely protected from their influence. You may not understand the absence today, but one day you will look back and thank the silence for guarding your peace. Pain that never reached you is still a blessing, even if it came through the loneliness you never asked for. It's not easy to accept that people you once prayed for were removed for your growth. But sometimes the answer to your prayer for peace is isolation from people who disturb it. Temporary people often bring temporary comfort followed by lasting confusion. Their words may sound sweet, but their presence leaves you questioning your worth. Their promises are loud, but their actions are inconsistent. Isolation spares you the exhaustion of chasing meaning in connections that were never meant to be deep. It teaches you how to sit with yourself instead of settling for company that doesn't see your value. It allows you to choose inner healing over external noise. When you're removed from the crowd, you begin to see who you are without the influence of others' expectations. You start to breathe without performing, rest without pretending, and live without the pressure to be constantly surrounded. In that space, your standards shift. You begin to desire depth over drama, substance over attention. You no longer crave people who fill a void. You seek those who respect your light. And in time, you recognize that what felt like loneliness was actually mercy in disguise, holding you back from pain you never had to endure because you were kept apart from what your soul didn't deserve. To carry value is not found in the number of friends you have, but in the depth of your relationship with yourself and God. In a world driven by likes, followers, and constant interaction, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that your worth is tied to your social circle. But true value isn't measured by how many people know your name, text you daily, or include you in their plans. It is found in how well you know yourself when no one is around, and how deeply you are anchored in your Creator when the noise of the world fades. Some of the most grounded, peaceful, and strong individuals are those who walk alone yet remain spiritually connected. Those who are unseen by people but held closely by God. The depth of your relationship with yourself determines how you move through silence, through storms, through seasons of loneliness. If you don't know who you are outside of people's attention, you'll always chase it. But when you begin to find comfort in your own company, and build a relationship with your inner self, the need for external validation starts to dissolve. You stop trying to impress, to fit in, to be chosen. You begin to choose yourself and realize that your presence has value, even if no one acknowledges it. Your worth was never meant to be confirmed by a crowd. Equally important is the connection you have with the one who created you. When that relationship is strong, everything else finds balance. You no longer fear solitude because you're never truly alone. In prayer, in reflection, in stillness, you find companionship that doesn't shift with mood, distance, or time. That bond feeds your soul, aligns your thoughts, and strengthens your heart. When others leave or fail to understand you, your relationship with God becomes the place you return to. Not just to be heard, but to be healed. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lost, or you can be alone and deeply at peace. Numbers don't define you. Depth does. When you begin to focus on the quality of your inner life, you stop counting friendships and start cultivating purpose. The foundation of your self-worth starts to rest not in how others see you, but in how connected you are to your truth, and to the one who sees all of you without needing explanation.